David Carl Richards the third.
The third.
DCF3.
DCR.
DCR. Where did the F come from?
I don't. Well, I don't know. There's a story behind that, maybe.
DCR3.
That's exactly right.
DCR3. Well, welcome.
How are you, Michael Kitces? I'm always surprised. I show up here. It's like I'm just getting ready to go home. I jump in. Boom! All of a sudden, I'm in a conversation.
Funny to see you in this Zoom room that we scheduled and pre-recorded, pre-scheduled for ourselves.
Funny. I know, it's crazy. It's really weird. What are we got to talk about something. You know what I think we should talk about? Why in the world? What's this deal with like running around looking for ways to increase efficiency by 0.5%, and then
we're back on scaling again.
No, but avoiding the whole. What we could do something different. We could just raise our fees. I heard you caused a little bit of a ruckus by. I heard you caused a little bit of a ruckus recently by daring to suggest such a thing.
Well, yeah. So yeah. I guess so. So let's come back to the scale. We're going to come back to the scaling conversation from a different version, from last week. But I will tie it back to one of the themes that we talked about in last episode that I do think is really powerful for advisors to think about, which is this number known as revenue per advisor. And it's pretty straightforward to calculate. Look at your revenue and divide by your number of advisors. Now, in this context, advisors, at least how we sort of use this for a lot of the benchmarking studies, research we do and other folks do, advisor means anyone who's client facing. So your lead advisors, the service advisors you hand clients off to, the associate advisor who helps handle emails and sits in meetings, like anyone who's client facing. So if it's a paraplanner that's solely back office crunching plans, not that person. It's not your client service administrators. Yes, they interact with clients, but they're not doing advisory things. It's not the rest of your support team. Like anybody that's that's advice giving, advice interacting with clients. So this revenue per advisor number is a powerful thing because on the one end, as we talked about last time, like you can only get that number so far because at the end of the day, like there's really only a couple of things that make it go up. I work with clients who write bigger checks, like who are willing to pay me more for my time, or I figure out how to serve more clients. Either because I get more efficient, I work harder, I work more hours, I delegate more things, I adopt more tech that makes me super efficient. But at the end of the day, like number of clients times fee that each client pays you kind of dictates where that number goes, and it only goes so far because they'll only pay you so much for the time that you spend with them. So what I see a lot of advisory firms doing these days in our wonderful modern era of technology is we're all on the hunt for the tech tool that will make me more efficient, right? That will increase my advisor capacity, that will improve my margins, right? If we're going to talk about this like revenue per advisor thing, like I get the tech that allows me to take on another 10 or 20 clients without hiring anyone. So now my revenue per advisor goes from $500,000 to $600,000 because I'm serving more people. And from the business ends, like same staff, more revenue means more profits, right? I add to the top line, I didn't add to my costs, it drops the bottom line. This is good. And I see a lot of focus on how do we get our tech tools to do this, to make this possible. And you can see this even some of the industry benchmarking studies. Like if you look, average advisory firm ends out with about 35% of costs in overhead. If you just take total revenue, divide out all the overhead costs, like my non-advisor support staff, my rent, my software, my E&O, professional development, all the different things that go in there. But there's kind of a range around it. Like some firms are at 30% and some firms are at 40%. So there's about a 10% swing in how efficient advisory firms get by just getting the right people in the right seats and leveraging technology efficiently to do it, to execute on it. But The interesting thing I find when I look at that, like, it's only about 10%. Like, if you were serving 80 clients, you still don't even get to 90. If you had $500,000 of revenue per advisor, you get 550. I mean, those are meaningful improvements, like profit margin of the business improves. Sure. But I find like we seem to have this idea, I think getting back to one of the comments you made last week, like, isn't there some world where, I 10x my business, I don't have to hire 10 times as many people? And that just doesn't seem to show up. And like, I don't want to be negative on all the cool things that we get from technology and the ways that it leverages us. Like, yes, it does matter, but there's this idea it's going to be like the panacea and make my, advisory firm wonderfully profitable and help me handle a bajillion clients. And it just doesn't seem to be happening that way for like 50 years of computers.
Right.
So I don't know if that resonates with you, that
well, the question
of like, are we putting too much faith in the technology to solve these problems? Because I got some other thoughts about what I think does solve these problems, but I want to start there of, technology is wonderful, robots and algorithms and AI is the future. Like, do you really believe that as that shows up in our advisory businesses, or are we pretty much still going to be doing the same things that we do for the time and for the clients we can manage?
Look, I don't know. I do feel like there's a challenge, a mismatch between taking traditional tools that were built for family office style solutions and applying them to, mid-market, if you will. I do think there's a mismatch sometimes between what we think we like, and it's often like what we want to provide, because we want to build monuments to ourselves and we want to treat everybody like it's super complex. And it turns out, I mean, I remember I was shocked at how relatively simple my average client, between 1 and 3 million. It was just awesome once I got clear about this. And we can go back to the Kevin Deppy episode again, right? Sorry, not Kevin Deppy, just Kevin. We can go back to the Kevin episode. Again, on the idea of like, could we just right size the services we're providing? I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I remember that
this is the whole, like, I'm doing all this work and sending statements out, sending quarterlies out to my clients, and then don't even want them, send them and nobody noticed. And then it's like, why was I spending all the time?
Yeah. And I remember that guy, I can't remember who it was. He was in like Virginia Beach or something, saying to me, like, I don't understand what all of you do. He's like doing all of it himself, incredibly high margins, build 700, kept 600, like whatever. So I think there is some there. Like, I think there's some things there, like, who do we serve? What tools are we using? Can we clean this up? Can we delete things? And then, of course, there are, can I schedule a little bit more efficiently because I use Calendly? Like, of course, there are things like that. But to me, it's sort of missing, like, if we've defined if most of us never do, I know I never do, like, if we've defined what we really want to build and what we're trying to optimize for, if the goal was really to go from 500 in revenue to 600 in revenue, there's a better way than technology.
One. So yes, I would agree in that. So I had a version of this come up with an event I was doing a couple of weeks ago. So, imagine like the advisor who's charging $3,000 for a planning fee, which is about where a lot of advisors are for upfront plans. $2,500, $3,000 is fairly common. A lot of advisors are doing ongoing fees in like the $3,000 range. So imagine with me for a moment, like you're doing $3,000 planning fees, and you want to figure out how to improve the profitability and efficiency of your business. So what most of us do, we gripe at insert financial planning software vendor here. Your software's too clunky. It's got too many clicks. Oh, I hate doing all the data entry. Can we get clients to do it? Can I get a team member to do it? Uh, could we get the output a little faster, more efficient? It's so tedious to run the scenarios I want to run in blank. Like we get frustrated at all the things that make the planning software take as long as it does. And I'll just go back to what I said earlier. Like at the end of the day, if you look at where the difference between really operationally efficient advisory firms and really operationally inefficient advisory firms are, so it's about a 10% swing in overhead. So I kind of figure it's like that's our opportunity at the end of the day. Like I could move this number by 10% if I can figure all the stuff out. Right. If I do all this stuff, like, yes, maybe I'll save a little bit more time on my planning process, but that's only a part of what I do year round. So that only moves the number so far. Then I got to find something to make my review meetings more efficient. Then I got to find something to make my client check-ins more efficient and so on down the line if you want to do this business wide. So look, I love me some good technology. And I love the idea of getting 10% efficiency back. But the thing I get stuck on pretty quickly when I talk to most firms of what's going on, like tell me about your firm and your revenue and your team and your client base. Like, yes, you could spend 6 to 18 months, like find the tech, get the tech, implement the tech, rebuild your systems, make them super efficient, get your 3, 5, 10% efficiency. Or you could just charge $3,500 for a planning fee instead of $3,000 for a planning fee, which is more than a 10% increase. And you can just do that overnight. Just change your advisory agreement.
Boom. I mean, like, how long?
Like, just
how long do we have to wait to get to the punchline of this? This is like the longest setup for the joke the whole time. Charge more.
Just fix your fees.
I feel like you were caveating, like hiding. Yes, just charge more fees. That's what you said somewhere, and it caused a little bit of a ruckus. Why does that cause such a ruckus?
Because I can't raise my fees. Because
I have this crazy story from a firm that had been around, I want to say 15 years, maybe longer. The guy had started it. He was a son of a preacher. And he, deep service ethos. And he started by teaching. He was doing something else. I think he was a teacher. He started by teaching personal finance classes in the public library.
Cool.
And after doing it for a while, he asked, like, would you like to donate $25? Like, it was like, like the money was just not a thing. People were like, please manage my money. He's like, I don't want to. Finally, he sets up an RA. He charges, as I recall, the AUM fee was 25 basis points, and grows and grows and grows to, like, I can't remember what the number at that point. I can't remember if it was $1 billion, but it was close if it wasn't.
Whew.
Sits down with, like, has brought in a bunch of other people, right? Brings in a new partner who I know pretty well. And they were like, well, should we right size the fees for what we're providing? Like, we're providing, like, it's like, oh, no. Everybody leave. They finally were like, it took a long time. They finally do it. They send out a letter to hundreds, if not more, like, if not 1,000, but hundreds of clients. Cause there was lots of small accounts and big accounts. And they went from a quarter of a point to 1%.
400%
overnight
price change
overnight. And the number of, I was like, how many people did you get? They were upset. He's like, we can count on one hand. We can count. So I can
go from 1% to 4%, though. I don't think.
No. This is a right sizing, like, just to market, and maybe some would argue below market, whatever. But my point just simply is, if you're providing value, there's a huge assumption that the audience we're talking to here is providing just massive value. They haven't priced in goal clarification. They haven't priced in presence. They haven't priced in listening. They haven't priced in the tax savings. They haven't priced in behavior. Like, they haven't priced any of that stuff in, because they're just such good people doing such good work. Well, but what the point is, there's room there to say, hey, I want to keep doing really great work for the people I'm doing it for. So I'm going to go from 3,000 to 3,500. or 3,000 to 4,000 on my planning fees.
Well, and as you're highlighting, I think so well to this story. I mean, I said it a little bit tongue in cheek, like, I don't know if we can all 4x our fees, because that's going to break some things.
Silly example. That's my favorite thing, though, is to use extreme examples. I know.
Well, no, but you make but I think the example is dead on, because no, most of us can't 4x our average fee to get there. Like, that's going to break some things. But that's not what your story was illustrating. Your story was illustrating what happens when you stick with the fees that you set up in the very, very, very early years of your practice and bind yourself to, which legitimately might be a quarter of the market rate. Because as I think about that, yeah, I know a lot of advisors that charge $3,000-$4,000 fees that still have clients on the books that pay less than $1,000, because that's what they charge in their first year, and they haven't gone back and fixed it. Or advisors that have $1 million minimums and still have $200,000 clients paying less than a quarter of their current market rate they're actually getting for the advice they're providing in the marketplace. So I'm like talking myself into full circle on it, that notwithstanding a little bit of the tongue-in-cheek response, I don't know if we can all 4x our fees. I think it actually illustrates the point well, that most of us really do have a segment of clients that are probably being charged a quarter of what they should be.
Yeah, and I think it's important to like always state, like, and that's okay, right? Like, if it's okay, like, you get to make those decisions. We don't have to be trying to, optimize for every single thing. But at the same time, just realize that that's a trade-off, and it's hard. Like, I want to say, well, you're not allowed to complain about the other side of that trade-off, but that's not true. You can also complain. Like, that's fine. Like,
say like that. That's where I have trouble. Like, look, if you want to run a quasi pro bono business where you give a ton of your services away at an ultra deep discount and basically get no profit out of your business because you're doing that, you get to do that. You are the owner. That, at least if you are actually the owner that's listening, like, you get to make that choice. My challenge is then when we start hearing the conversations of advisory firms can't scale, this stuff doesn't work, you can't build a big advisory firm on blank business model. I'm like, no, you can. You just have to actually charge your current market rate to all the people you work with. If you make the decision to undercharge a material segment of your clients, you can do that. But I hate to say you can't, but like, I have less sympathy for the difficulty that you're now saying you're having in your inability to scale the business, and all the conversations that start cropping. Well, if only tech was better, then my business would be profitable. I'm like, no, if only you charged what you're worth, the business would be profitable. Since you're choosing not to charge a market rate, you're hoping tech will be your Hail Mary, and it's turning out not to be, because it only goes so far and we can only do so much with the tech. And so I find at the end of the day, like, a lot of advisory firms seem to be blaming tech for what are ultimately fee problems. And because they don't want to fix their fee problems, they're trying to fix it with tech. And it turns out just you can only get so, like, if you are 50 to 75% below market rate, because you need to like 3 to 4x your fees to get back to where they should be, the tech's not cool enough to solve that much of a gap. You can get a 10% move. It's not going to solve it when you're at a third or a quarter of the market rate.
Yeah, this also, it's so interesting to me how often this comes down to really, to me, like, really deep questions around identity and where I choose to hide. And why am I not like the identity piece to me is interesting in here, because I have so many conversations like this around like this with other authors. And, the complaints aren't about tech. They're about the publishing industry and how hard it is, and social media. And if I could just find that. And there seems to be an element sometimes that sneaks in here, like, that struggle becomes so much part of the identity. It's like the struggling, like the starving artist identity, showing up at the coffee shop, talking about being a struggling artist. It is so
They're successful and
intertwined.
they lose all the relatability because you're like, you're not struggling. I saw
Yeah,
you on
yeah. So
tour.
I think there's just this identity piece of like, and a place to hide where maybe there's some bigger questions here to ask about, like, what am I worth? I mean, man, that like what that's a big question. How do I show up and
if
charge what I'm like? How do I show up and be convinced and committed to my own value?
if I'm
Those are
an
big
if I'm
questions.
an advisor who helps people, how do I turn them away? If I'm an advisor who
Yeah,
helps people, am I a bad person if I price some people out who I know darn well
yeah.
need advice?
Those are
No,
those are le-
we all know they need the help.
those are legit like, and man, how beautiful is it that we have so many people in this industry that ask those kind of questions,
Yeah.
and struggle with that conflict and try to sort it out. And we've talked in the past about unique ways of solving that problem, and trying to separate maybe the business from the pro bono work, or we've talked a lot about that. But I just think here, to me, this question of like, I'll go hide behind the search for better tech reminds me of like how many time management books do I need to read before I
Yeah.
just decide that every morning I need to write through the 3 things down on a 3x5 card. Well,
Mhm.
it turns out that's kind of hard. It's not complicated at all. It turns out it's hard. So there must be a complicated. So I think that's the beauty to me, is like, how beautiful is it that we just keep coming back to this challenge of like,
So
how do we help the people that need help? How do we show up in a way that we're valued the way we want to? How do we build the kind of business? All of that's tension, and there's no resolving it. You're just going to have to live in that tension and do the best we can. And the answer for you is different from the answer to the person sitting next to you.
well, so I got to ask for your help then, your help on behalf of our collective audience of listeners. Like, how do we make a dent in this issue? What do we need to think about? What questions should we be asking ourselves if we're really ready to deal with this? Right? 'Cause I mean, just the math of the business is pretty straightforward at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Fixing your fees will obliterate any technology solution you possibly can find.
Mm-hmm.
You know who they are that are getting undercharged. It's at least your early clients. For some of it's still all of the clients.
Mm-hmm.
The answer isn't really like raise your fees. I mean, it is, but the hard thing is not raising your fees. The hard thing is something that happens deep down inside of us when we think about that and what's going to happen if we do that. And it's some combination of us and other people and what we think other people are going to think of us and what we're going to be able to do or help or not help other people. Like, it's a people thing. It's not actually a business thing.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we start doing the work on that?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful question. The thing that comes to mind to me is you practice, and what I would practice, and I'm like trying to be better at this myself. Like, what I would practice is getting clear about noticing the stories that come up. I'll give you an example. There's some projects I'm working on that scare the crap out of me because of who I'm working with and why. And I was
So you're
noticing,
still imposter syndroming.
oh, like it doesn't seem to get. I mean, the only thing that's made it better is my Justin Castelli, Mr. Burns, who hangs out right by my desk now, is like, just to recognize, oh, there's that feeling. That feeling actually means I'm about to do something cool. We've talked about that. But I think noticing that, remembering that what you do is so valuable, and reminding yourself that, like, you're not oh, please, please, please pick me. It's I at least I still feel like that sometimes, like, oh, why would so and so, and there, we can get into more details in the next couple of episodes, but why would so and so do this project with me? Well, so I think the answer to me is to unravel those stories. I wish I could find the I think it's a Nietzsche quote about circumstances. Maybe you can do your little cool thing you do. Circumstances, they'll run, and we'll call it fate, or we'll call it our lives. They'll run subconsciously. So the idea of like, man, we'll put that quote in the show notes if Michael doesn't do his wizardry. But the idea that there are narratives and stories playing in the background about your value, and it's not any easier in our industry, because I've always thought this, like, so many people don't understand what you actually do, and the press is often talking about something different and using the same word, financial advisor. So you have to unwind all that. And I one way I did that was I kept a Stoke file. I would keep like the nice notes. Like, I just got a card from somebody, it's a handwritten card. And like, I'd keep the nice notes, and I'd remind myself. And so then when you go to say like, okay, at least this next client, I'm going to start today. I'm going to move my fee to where I want it to be before I go talk to all those people back here, because that's really scary. Then I can kind of gin up the courage, maybe look through the Stoke file, remember value, and then you pay attention to the story that shows up. And listen, I'm going to be really blunt. Like, the story may be like, what your mom said to you. You know what I mean? The story may be what your dad, the story may be your fourth grade elementary school teacher who said, it could be your tennis coach who said, if you don't try harder, you're not going to amount to anything. Like, we all hear those stories.
Yeah.
And so that stuff, don't underestimate that stuff still playing in the background, and you not realizing how valuable you are. And that, whatever that great quote was too, like, our greatest fear, I think it was Marianne Williamson quote, right? Our greatest fear is not that we'll be terrible. Our greatest fear is that we're powerful. And so I think so much of that we dismiss as woo-woo like talk, but it's really actually having an impact. And you see it with your clients. Oh, now I understand why you're not saving money, or now I understand why you're spending so much, because that thing that happened when you were 7. You see it with your clients, but sometimes we don't translate it. So I would just start paying attention. I think of this as a beautiful spiritual practice, right? To just start examining and unraveling. And it's like layers of an onion that get in the way of like, why can't I show up the way I want to show up in my business? If that's what you want. So sorry, we got to wrap up. Step 1, try to get clear about what you want. And of course, like it is with your clients, that's goal discovery over time. It's cute. You think you know what that is, but you're going to learn over time, right? Just keep unraveling. Number 2, start examining the stories that get in the way of you showing up for that thing. And then just practice, repeat over and over and over. My wife and I are like, it's just so interesting how many layers there are to that onion. Just when you think you've done the work, suddenly something new shows up. And you're like, oh, shoot, I forgot about that. That's, sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's what I think of when we talk about value and our work in the world.
It resonates with me, just like having gone through a lot of price increases over the past 10 or 15 years, that I like sort of the framing of just start examining, like just start reflecting on the stories that get in the way.
Pay attention.
Because I found like, I reflect back, it like there were a lot of different ones that cropped up. Like, first it was, if I raise my fees, all my growth will stop. Like, no one will want to hire me anymore. I'll kill my business. So, at least for me, because I have to solve everything with spreadsheets. Like, I made a giant spreadsheet of like tracking and looking at all of the growth we were having, all the lead flow that we were having, all the business that was coming in, to like mathematically prove to myself there's enough momentum to the business that even if it slows down a little bit, like, it's going to be okay. We have plenty of growth. In fact, if we take fewer people at a much higher fee, it's actually just more profitable. But I had to math it to get out of that. I might just kill the growth if I don't do it. Then when I got there, I was like, oh, but I still can't do it because they were with me, they took a risk on me early on. All of that, right? Like how can you raise fees on the people that you started working with at the very beginning?
Yeah. So much
Which,
there.
like someone had said to me, and now I say this as often as I can to pay it forward. Like, Michael, you're pretty good at what you're doing. Look at how little you've been charging them. Like, they got a below market rate for years. The debt's repaid. Like, yes, they took a risk on you by being an early client, and they got services for like a half to a quarter the market rate for years.
Right. We're not talking about retroactively billing them.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, like we're not going back to say like billing error. We've been undercharging you for the past 6 years. Here's a collective invoice of everything you should have been paying us all along. Like all we're doing is fixing it going forward. They've been getting a deal for years. Like you both did well on this. It's okay to reset. And that was like, cool, but then I still can't help as many people. So, right, then you have to go through all of the, at least for me, the dynamics of, but I really want to help everybody, but you just literally can't. Like there's not
more stories,
hours in the day, week, month, and year. Like there are more people who will want your help than you can help. That's just the reality of being in a helping profession. So at some point you have to draw lines or you just burn yourself out.
Man, this one could go on for a long time, Michael, but we better just say amen.
We can say amen and hopefully give some people some stuff to think about of whatever your story is that's getting in the way of just charging what you're really worth in the marketplace, because does amazing things for the business.
Everyone involved, actually. Cheers, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl.